Here's what's coming up on the world today. Iran promises to avenge an attack on its Natanz nuclear enrichment facility. Police and protesters clash following the death of another black man in Minnesota. Plus, Prince Harry in the UK to pay his respects to his grandfather ahead of the funeral set for Saturday. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Iran is blowing hot over the attack on its Natanz uranium enrichment plant, saying it would take revenge on the perpetrators, as Qam's new advanced centrifuges to enrich uranium had just been activated there.
The attack on the Iranian nuclear site comes as Israeli public radio quoted unidentified intelligence sources on Sunday as saying that Israel's Mossad spy agency carried out a cyber attack against Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not refer to the incident, but spoke about the fight against Iran's nuclearization. During a ceremony on Sunday with Israeli military and intelligence chiefs marking the 73rd anniversary of Israel's founding, he made no direct reference to Natanz, but said the fight against Iran's nuclearization is a massive task. On Monday, Iran accused its arch-foe of sabotaging its key nuclear site and vowed to avenge for the attack. That appeared to be the latest episode in a long-running covert war. During a news conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said that multiple sources confirmed the Zionist regime was behind the attack and Iran's response will be one of revenge. He also said Iran will replace damaged uranium enrichment centrifuges in Natanz with advanced ones. Authorities described the incident a day earlier as an act of nuclear terrorism and said Tehran reserved the right to take action against the perpetrators. Iran's nuclear energy chief, Ali Akbar Salehi, says an emergency power system has been activated at Natanz to offset the outage caused by the attack, and there will be no major delay in the facility's operations.
The VOA's Linda Gradstein is in Jerusalem. Linda, great to see you as always. But let's begin with the mixed messages that are being sent by Israel in connection with this attack. First of all, multiple sources claim that this was an Israeli cyber attack. And then the Prime Minister goes on to say the fight against Iran's denuclearization is a massive attack. And that almost sounds quite inciting, doesn't it?
Well, there's two things. One is that it's very possible that Israel was behind it. The other is that Israel, certainly wants deterrence against Iran, and Israel wants Iran to think that it's able to do these kinds of attacks. That said, Israel usually is not going to openly take credit for this kind of attack because that's basically saying to Iran, if Israel does that, Iran will feel that it has to retaliate. So in similar cases in the past, Israel has not openly taken credit, but has kind of hinted that it was responsible. And that's also sending a message to Iran saying that Israel can attack Iran whenever it chooses to. And that does also seem to be the case here.
Yeah, and Iran and Israel have never agreed on Iran's nuclear program, and that's because Israel believes that the enrichment of uranium is to develop nuclear weapons targeted at Israel. So Israel is not in support of current talks to revive the JCPOA, which started last week. Where does this attack now leave the talks, especially as Iran promises to avenge the attack?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, on one hand, there are some in Israel that are saying it might actually push the United States even more towards the JCPOA, feeling that it doesn't want to in order to sort of calm the situation down. And also, in the former administration with President Trump, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump were very much on the same page, and Israel was very happy when President Trump pulled out of the JCPOA. And certainly President Biden seems to be taking a different tack. That said, there are some in Israel, including some of the former heads of the Mossad, who say that the JCPOA might not be a bad thing for Israel, that it puts off any Iranian nuclear program for something like 10 years. That's a long time in the Middle East. So there is a debate within Israel about what the JCPOA means. But the official government policy certainly is, and Netanyahu repeated it today with the American defense minister, who's in Jerusalem today, the American Secretary of Defense, saying that Israel will not allow Iran to become a nuclear power, that they see that as an existential threat to Israel.
So the country will not accept any credit or will not take credit for this attack on the Natanz nuclear facility, but has it responded at all to Iran's threats?
No, it hasn't responded to Iran's threats either. Although, what they've said in the past several times is that Israel knows how to protect itself and it will protect itself this time. I also want to add that this isn't the first recent attack that Israel is, accused of doing. There was an attack on an Iranian Revolutionary Guard base that was on a ship last week. And it certainly increased the tensions. And it is certainly possible that there will be an Iranian response. There have also been several Israeli assassinations in the past year of Iranian nuclear scientists. The question is, what kind of Iranian response will it be? Israel has certainly stepped up its alert, but they're not going to officially comment. And, Israel doesn't really want a war. Iran doesn't want a war. The question is whether, something is going to start that's going to be kind of a slippery slope, or if things are just going to calm down after this.
Exactly, Linda. Thanks again for bringing us up to speed on this.
Thank you.
A night of protests have followed the shooting of a black man in a traffic stop in the U.S. city of Brooklyn Center, north of Minneapolis. The man has been identified as 20-year-old Daunte Wright. The Brooklyn Center Police Department said officers had pulled a man over for a traffic violation on Sunday afternoon and determined that he had an outstanding arrest warrant. Tear gas and rubber bullets were fired by the police as angry protests erupted in a Minneapolis suburb after Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old black man, was shot dead during a traffic stop. Outside the Brooklyn Center Police Department on Sunday night, smoke billowed as a line of police officers fired the rubber bullets and chemical agents at protesters, some of whom lobbed rocks, bags of garbage and water bottles at the police. The man killed was identified by relatives and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who said in a statement that he was monitoring the unrest as the state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement. Daunte's mother, Kate Wright, said she had received a call from her son on Sunday afternoon telling her that the police had pulled him over in Brooklyn Center for having air fresheners dangling from his rear view mirror, illegal in Minnesota. She could hear the police tell her son to get out of the vehicle.
Then I heard the police officer come to the window and say, "Put the phone down and get out of the car." And Daunte said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, explain to you when you get out of the car." Like a minute later, I called and his girlfriend answered, which was the passenger in the car, and said that he'd been shot.
In a statement, the Brooklyn Center Police Department said officers had pulled a man over for a traffic violation on Sunday afternoon and determined that he had an outstanding arrest warrant. They said that when the police tried to arrest him, he re-entered the vehicle. An officer then shot the driver, who drove for several blocks before he crashed into another vehicle. He was pronounced dead at the scene. A female passenger in the vehicle suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The state's Department of Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington told reporters a robust National Guard presence will be deployed to the area for the next 2 or 3 days, following the night of clashes between police and protesters. This comes as the murder trial of Derek Chauvin over the death of George Floyd has been underway in the city for 2 weeks now. Chauvin was filmed kneeling on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes during an arrest operation in Minneapolis last May. We're entering the third week in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former police officer, as we said in the report, who's charged with murdering George Floyd in May last year. In court today are Dr. Jonathan Rich, who echoes what you already heard last week, that Floyd's death was caused by a lack of oxygen and was due to the restraint and positional asphyxiation that he was subjected to. The defense has suggested that Floyd may have died from a heart attack. Dr. Rich says he reviewed Floyd's medical records, the autopsy and videos of his death, and could conclude, that George Floyd did not die from a primary cardiac event and he did not die from a drug overdose. He says Floyd may have had high blood pressure due to an exceptionally strong heart that rapidly pumped blood throughout his body. The heart muscle, he explains, adding that exercise makes it stronger. Like other muscles, the heart can get tired out over time and does require treatment, but it is not in and of itself a heart condition. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more on the latest in the United States. Maria, I'm always happy when I see you, knowing what's going on in your country. But let's begin with what happened last night. 20-year-old Dante Wright was shot during a traffic stop by the police. Expectedly, things are heated up around there, coupled with the trial of Derek Chauvin still ongoing. How are authorities maneuvering the looming crisis?
Thank you, Amarachi. And it's unfortunate that this has occurred again in Minnesota and just shortly, not too far away from where George Floyd was killed. And so we know that there have been protests. Obviously, many people are very upset and angered by this, but they're working to try to have these protests to be one that are peaceful and one that are really going to get to the bottom and to ask for change. We've seen Dante Wright's mother. She has been out speaking on the issue, stating that shortly after her son was shot and killed, that the girlfriend did answer the phone and she was a witness to this. And so you're going to see that Minneapolis and Minnesota as a whole is really going to have to grapple with and deal with how to address this issue. And it's obviously, many people are saying this could impact the George Floyd trial. Obviously, the defense is very unhappy about this because they feel this could potentially put their case and pretty much make sure that Derek Chauvin is convicted of the crime.
And again, Maria, we see police brutality come to the surface. I'm sure there are flashbacks, to George Floyd, especially during the protests. What are you hearing, though, from the Black communities in Minnesota, what they intend to do about what has just happened?
The Black community is going to continue to push forward. I think that their first effort is going to be to ensure that we get through this trial with Derek Chauvin. And obviously, those officers who were there on the scene with George Floyd, they're going to be brought to trial later on this summer. And so making sure that there's clearly a precedent that is set and that there is an end and a reform to policing in Minneapolis and Minnesota. We know that there have been police reform measures brought forth. And so those policies are definitely going to be addressed. And this is going to just encourage the Black community to continue to peacefully protest, but more importantly, to request change by their city council and their local officials.
Maria, talk quickly some more about the police reform, because, the protests are not going anywhere, apparently. We saw huge protests and they just, rippled across the nation and across the world when George Floyd was murdered. So talk to us about how the police is trying to launder its image in light of all that's happened.
Well, the reform measures, there have been several reform measures brought across the country, and we know that Minnesota is one of those areas, and Minneapolis specifically. But these reform measures are going to be addressing the way in which the use of force, that is going to be the primary focus across the country and with policing, is how they are allowed to use force, because it is clear from even what you've seen with the George Floyd trials that use of force measures are not ones that are above and excessive. And so I think that focusing in on holding police accountable when they go above the use of force training and they become excessive in their measures in which they begin to address and they begin to retain and detain potential suspects in a crime.
Maria, thanks again for joining us and do stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead on the program, we'll have more interesting stories from around the world. Plus, do you want to study on the sand? Maybe you should try out a day at the Spanish beachside classroom. We'll have that story in a moment. Join us again. Welcome back to The World Today. One person has been shot dead, another injured earlier today in front of a hospital in Paris. The attacker fled on a motorcycle. A police source said the injured person is now being treated inside the hospital, the Henri Dunant, which is also a COVID-19 vaccination center. The motive for the shootings remain unknown, but BFM television said the person killed was a man and the injured person was a woman who worked as a security officer at the hospital, which is located in the Upper Market 16th arrondissement. The vaccination center at the hospital was operating at the time of the shooting. Britain is still mourning over the passing of Prince Philip. Prime Minister Boris Johnson today hailed him for sustaining the Queen with love throughout an extraordinary Elizabethan age. He said this to Parliament today.
I beg to move that an humble address be presented to Her Majesty, expressing the deepest sympathies of this House on the death of His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and the heartfelt thanks of this House and this nation for his unfailing dedication to this country and the Commonwealth, exemplified in his distinguished service in the Royal Navy in the Second World War, his commitment to young people in setting up the Duke of Edinburgh's award, a scheme which has touched the lives of millions across the globe, his early passionate commitment to the environment and his unstinting support to Your Majesty throughout his life. Indeed,
Prince Harry is in town to pay his respects to his grandfather, whom he has praised for providing unparalleled devotion and dedication to the Queen, saying he will be sorely missed by the nation and the world. Releasing a statement on his return to Britain from his home in the United States ahead of the funeral on Saturday, April 17th, Prince Harry said the Duke of Edinburgh had been a man of service, honour and great humour. The statement reads, "He's been a rock for Her Majesty the Queen with unparalleled devotion by her side for 73 years of marriage. And while I could go on, I know that right now he would say to all of us, beer in hand, oh, do get on with it." So on that note, Grandpa, thank you for your service, your dedication to Granny, and for always being yourself. Meghan, Archie and I, as well as your future great-granddaughter, will always hold a special place for you in our hearts. And it's all not gloom in the UK over the passing of Prince Philip. Shops are open today and Britons are back on the streets as the government loosens COVID-19 restrictions and the number of vaccinated people rises. Shops are open, as I said. Leisure parks are also open. And it appears it's really a new dawn. Here's more in our Global Update.
Britons queued up outside retailers across England on Monday to release their pent-up shopping fever as England's shops reopened after 3 months of lockdown. After imposing the most heavy restrictions in Britain's peacetime history, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the reopening was a major step towards freedom, but urged people to behave responsibly as the coronavirus is still a threat. In London's Oxford Street, dozens of people queued up outside Primark and Nike Town, undeterred by the unseasonably cold weather. India has reported a record 168,912 COVID-19 infections overnight, overtaking Brazil to become the second most affected country globally by the coronavirus. The country's overall tally reached 13.53 million, surpassing Brazil's 13.45 million cases, according to data compiled by the media. The United States led the global tally with 31.2 million cases. It also showed that deaths in India stood at 904, taking the total to 170,179. The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Latin America has exceeded 26.3 million as of Sunday, with Brazil leading with about 13.5 million. Brazil registered 1,803 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, bringing the national death toll to over 355,000. The country has been experiencing a new wave of cases since January, and many states have reported an overloading of their healthcare system.
講咧，就一個多月落嚟，我哋認為香港嘅疫苗接種率咧係有。
Hong Kong's Chief Executive Carrie Lam says the regional city will loosen some measures for residents who have been fully inoculated from late April as authorities seek to boost the take-up of vaccines in the global financial hub. Bars and pubs, which are currently shut, will be allowed to resume operations in phases provided all staff and customers have been vaccinated. Visitation to public hospitals and care homes could also be permitted for vaccinated people.
Does having school at the beach sound like a dream after a year of remote learning and socially distanced classrooms? Well, one school in the Spanish region of Murcia is doing just that, trying to combine clear air and a new way of teaching. Outside the Felix Rodriguez de la Fuente Hospital, school, mask-wearing children sit before a portable blackboard at rows of green desks neatly spaced out on the sandy shores of Playa de los Nietos, that's grandchildren's beach. Some barefoot pupils wriggle their toes in the sand as they play xylophones, while others crouch over their workbooks to prevent the breeze from blowing their papers out to the sea. The lessons are part of a broader project known as Fresh Air, which aims to create better air quality for children during the COVID-19 pandemic, including through open-air learning. Teachers begin preparing the beach at 8 in the morning. 8 classes take part in the 20-minute lessons and groups rotate through the different areas. Children at the school are aged from 3 to 12 and remain in their class bubbles. And there have been no reported cases of coronavirus so far since the classes began.
It's safe. Children are having a great fun. They are like unbelievable learning, because what they learn here they don't forget. It's something, it's unbelievable. It's something completely amazing. It's completely amazing because the children arrived the next day to school and they're like delighted. They feel like they are doing something different from other schools, and then they are asking, when are we going to go again? Where are we going to go to the beach again?
Well, that sounds really relaxing and like a lot of fun. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi.